Hey everyone. Today we're going to go through the transition from a pitch to a script, and we're going to talk a little bit about story structure. So hang tight. Going to have an interesting show today. All except for this. Hi, my name's Eagle. I am the publisher, line editor, and one of the writers over at No Earth Comics. And for those of you who don't know, I live in Houston. And that was just one of my emergency devices going off because we're right smack dab in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime hurricane. Fortunately, I'm just south of downtown Houston, and, well, basically, right now I live on an island. I can't tell you how much I've always wanted to live on an island, but this is not exactly the way I intended to achieve it. So, you're going to have to pardon the sound of the emergency tones going off. We have food, we have water, we have power, we have all of our services, and generator. We're set, okay? And since I live in a warehouse and work in a warehouse, this is a cinder block and steel truss construction. It's not going anywhere. But today we're going to talk about a new project that I've been working on, and this is called The Spirit of the Wolf. And this one's going to be a bit unusual in the fact that it's not set in our standard modern time frame. It's set in our 1893 time frame. So what you're looking at right here is the pitch. And we start with the log line. And for the log line on this one, The Man with No Name 20 Years Later. It's not really what it's about, but it's enough to give people who are reading the pitch an idea of where I'm going with it. And that's all I was looking for. Then we go over the characters. Now, there's only one recurring character in this book. So I go over who he is. We go over psychological, physically, clothing. Then we go into the setting. And 1893 is the end of the Old West. And this is a good place for our aging 50-year-old troubleshooter. Then we go into the theme, acceptance and futility. Lupo's reticent to accept himself for who he is, but is always looking for acceptance. Basically, he has an idea of a utopia. And being a black man in the Old West, just after the Civil War, a war in which the Union lost, he is dealing with a lot. And he has been for the last 30 years since the end of the war. And this is part of who he is. And we're not going to touch on it all. Well, we're not going to go into it in depth in the book, but we are going to touch on it because it is part of his motivations. Then we go into conflict, and then we do our 6-issue breakdown. And this is an overarching story, and each issue has to be a complete story in and of itself, but they all have to fit together into a larger story. And so this pitch has already been approved by the board, and it didn't take much to get it approved because it's a tight pitch. But now we go into how to actually do the writing. And this script is being written Marvel style. If you are one of our beginning writers, we're going to want to see full script. Once we have paired you with an artist and you're comfortable with the artist, then we will consider going to Marvel script for your Marvel style for your scripting, because in the end it makes for better collaborations. So the first thing I do is I do page 1 through page 22. And I lay them out like this, and this is so that I can get all of the pages I'm going to need to fill in. And this is an outline, but it's not really an outline because it's an outline that's going to change and evolve into an actual script. And here, I've actually written the first 3 pages. Notice here that there's a link in here, and that is to a specific page of image search that I did so that the artist can see the landscape that we're talking about. Because the landscape here is going to play, it's going to be an additional character. And so our first 3 pages are going to be showing that landscape. The rest of the book is going to be taking place in that landscape. And I've written some notes for the last page. Now then, here's where I need to talk about something important. When you write a comic book script, you are doing something that is very, very concise. It's very tight. You can't do a loose, flowing script in a comic book the way you do in a novel, because you only have 22 pages per issue, and those 22 pages have to mean something. If you have 22 pages, it's nothing but this nice flowing script, and you don't come to an end, you're cheating your reader. You're forcing your reader to buy the next book, whether they want to or not, because you didn't put in an ending. It's not a standalone story. It's not something that is going to work with our company philosophy. Now, there's plenty of companies out there right now that are doing the never-ending story where each issue is nothing but a chapter in this big flowing story, and the fans don't like it. They're stopping buying it. They're not spending the money on it that they used to spend, or they're waiting for the trade to come out in the hopes that it'll be a complete story. So, 22 pages. We write the first page, we write the last page, and then we start filling in. Now, on this last page, all I've written is 2 lines of dialogue, because that 2 lines of dialogue is going to tell me what I've already got planned for that page. It's just placeholder text for my purposes, not for the reader. So, notice right here on page 8, we have a single line, walking out of the tavern. That's because we're using something called the 3-act structure. Now, this is what I'm using for this book. This is not necessarily what you have to use, but I'm going to tell you that the 3-act structure is an excellent design tool for you as a writer. And the 3-act structure says that you're going to have 3 acts, and each act is going to have its own roller coaster of events until it comes to an end, and then it starts on the next act. As a classic example of the 3-act structure, or actually the 4-act structure, but I'm going to use it because it's an excellent example of how to do this. We're going to take Batman Begins. And in Batman Begins, we have 4 acts. The first act ends with his fight against Ra's al Ghul. The second act covers his fight with Falcone. The third act covers his fight with the Scarecrow. And the fourth act covers his final fight with the real Ra's al Ghul. And so what happens is each one of these acts has a different villain, a different challenge, and covers a different aspect of Bruce Wayne / Batman's personality. And each one builds on the previous one until we get one set of stakes with the first one, which is Bruce Wayne, his personal stakes. The second one, we start talking about crime. The third one, we start talking about saving the city from hysteria. And the fourth one, we start talking about saving the city physically. So the stakes raise in each act, and the villains become more intense with each act. And in the end, we learn things about the Bruce Wayne Batman character because he has to use different aspects of his personality of his core character to overcome each one of these obstacles. So 22 pages for 3 acts divides into roughly 7 pages an act. So we can use this for planning, we can use this for plotting, we can use this for breakdown. So on this one, page 8, I have him walking out of the tavern. That's because this is the end of this act. The act ended on page 7, but page 8 is the denouement. And then we go into the next part. Now, somewhere around page 14 or 15, we're going to end the next act. So the first act is going to be him showing up in town, and we're going to establish who his personality is through the use of a tavern brawl that he does not take place in, because he's not a pacifist. He just doesn't see the need to participate in violence unless he has personal stakes in it. And at this point, he doesn't have personal stakes, so he's able to walk away. He walks out of the tavern, leaving the fight going on behind him. In the next act, we're going to have him getting involved with the town and have him gain personal stakes in the town. And in the third act is going to climax with him being in a gunfight. And that will be followed on page 21 by him being arrested, and on page 22 by him being in the jail. So this is the structure of this story. And the reason that we do this kind of a structure is because it allows us to flesh out the story in an easier way. It allows us to already have a series of highs and lows built into the structure that allows us to write this easier. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure where the second act is going to end. I'm still working that out in my head. I've got some ideas on what I want to establish in the second act. But I know that the one thing that I need to do in the second act is establish the stakes. And for this, he's going to have a connection with something within the town. And it's going to have to be a heavy connection for him to be willing to draw a gun on somebody and for him to be willing to engage in a gunfight. So this is part of the predicament of writing. I'm going through this and I know where I want the story to end. I know where the story started. And I have to figure out how to get it to the end. Now, the reason we write the end first is so you don't come up to the end of the book, you've run out of pages, and you still don't have a climax. You still don't have a knowledge of what happens next. And I see so many writers do this. I see so many writers not take the time to plot their story, not take the time to structure their story, not take the time to use the 5 elements of fiction in order to put these building blocks together to make this whole thing work. And I'm hoping that this gave you some insight into the process. And we were lucky in the fact that I wanted to make a video and I happen to have this work in progress that illustrated some of the points I've been making in other videos. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. There's a lot going on, and I've been letting y'all get up to date on some of it. If you're wanting more information, please check out the website at know-earth.com. Please like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to the Twitter. I'm using all of these as ways of getting information out. So, thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to talk again.